Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about this thing. We're going to be all about the video, just about the bus, the symptoms it's had, the issues it has, and what has changed since we had it worked on. So stay tuned, and we're going to go through the whole process of what was done to it, what the symptoms were, what was done to it, and what the results are afterwards. So stand by, and we'll get to it. Here we go. Sorry for the sun, but the sun's setting, so we're going to check all about the bus. What were the symptoms we had with this thing? Well, we took it in because it wouldn't start when it was cold. Below 40 degrees, 45, had to plug it in for half an hour, 45 minutes before it would start. When it did start, it rattled and banged and blew smoke like a cloud until it warmed up. Second thing, had no power. Just previous videos you saw, it just smoked going through town. Smoke would just roll out all the time, no power. And that's why I took it down to the mechanic in Cedar City at Amen Diesel, and I'll put a link on here on a card when I get it here, and I'll show you what their business. They were in a previous video that I did, and the flies are terrible out here. But yeah, so anyway, we got ahead and we had a no start issue. We had a no power, excessive smoke, and then when it got to Cedar City, it had an overheating issue. Like I said in the video, you couldn't even go through town, uptown, without it getting 200, 220 degrees in town, and it's never done that before. So we're going to go through like four things. What was the symptoms, the evaluation, the repairs, and the results, or the next step? See what happens. The symptoms were, like I said before, no cold start, wouldn't start very well. Blew a lot of smoke when it did start. Blew smoke going down the mountain, and no power, and got to the Cedar City and had no power and overheating. So those are the symptoms. What the evaluation was after that, it did take 3 weeks for me to living in the U-Haul to get the bus back. Not that it's all the mechanic's fault, because the first week they were busy. I understand that. I dropped it off and said, here it is. They said, we can't get it in. We're backlogged for a week. Understandable. Second week, they got it in. They ran some tests on it. The computer showed nothing. You know, it's just, there's no engine light coming on. The computer showed nothing. So it did show when the mechanic was driving it, and the other mechanic was on the computer looking at the gauges and exactly what the bus was doing. The exhaust back pressure was high, and the turbo boost was low, which is should be the other way around. Should be a turbo boost should be high, and the exhaust back pressure should be low. So we'll go through it and explain what he did, and see if it fixed it or not. Well, let's take you in and show you what the evaluation was after this. I'm going to use this little stick right here. This is a pointer. Kind of show you what parts were replaced, what was done, and what the symptoms are afterwards, if they repaired it, or whether it changed the symptoms or eliminated them. We'll see. So let's go in here, pop open the hood, and see what we got. And if anybody wants to share this with their mechanic friends or comment about what you might think it may be, when we get to the end of the video, just let me know. But to wrap this up, this is an international 2006 International VT365 turbo diesel engine. And what this is basically is a 2006 International Ford Power Stroke engine. My mechanic said this is the same engine right here. You can put this engine in a Ford pickup. A Ford pickup can be put in this bus engine. It's the same thing, except for a few placement of a few pulleys and belts and things. He said they're exactly the same. 6.0 liter turbo diesel, power stroke. He also explained to me too, he said, you have to think about this. This engine is in a 2006 Ford pickup that weighed 6,000 pounds. This engine is also in a 2006 International school bus that weighs 24,000 pounds. So this engine, and you think about it, same engine in a pickup, as in, this is like what, 4 times heavier than the pickup, but it's the same engine. So it's not going to have a lot of power going up hills. I can guarantee that. It runs down the highway flat speed at 70 all day long. Well, just loves it. It loves flat roads. It loves Kansas. It really did. It went through like crazy. So anyway, this is back to here. This is VT365, which I think stands for a V8 turbo powered 365 cubic inch turbo diesel engine. So what the mechanic did, he said, when I told him, I said, the symptoms were hard starting when it's cold, etc., and no power and smoking, etc., all that. And the overheating issue, which was something new that I had issues with overheating for a while, but not. We're going to explain that in just a minute. But he said the fan clutch right here was shot. He said the fan, you could just take it and spin it freely. You're not supposed to be able to do that. That's what caused, and he said, a lot of the heating issues. When he was just driving around town, he would be overheating 218, 225 just up and down the road around his shop. So he said, we have to get the fan clutch replaced to see what else it's doing. So that was one issue, and he thought that since the exhaust pressure was high and the the exhaust back pressure was high and the turbo boost was low, which was backwards of what it's supposed to be, that he replaced the sensor right here, which is exhaust back pressure sensor. Little tube that goes down here. Don't mind my mouse trap. I'm just catching mice out here. It goes into the exhaust manifold right here. So it picks up the exhaust back pressure off the engine. It only picks it up one side. So I don't know if that, whether that needs to be somewhere else or what. But anyway, replace that. And the third thing he did was, since it was, he thought that it was, too much back pressure on the turbo. So hold on, let's go look here a second. We're going to lower the camera and we're going to do this. All right, this is what else he did. Yeah, cut the muffler off to eliminate the back pressure. You know what? It kind of did. He said after he cut the muffler off and ran it test drive, the turbo boost was double, but the back pressure was still a little high. So that's the reason why he replaced the back pressure sensor. So it did give it a more power. I think it does have more power. So, and having the exhaust cut off and just ran a straight pipe out the back. Well, we already had a straight pipe anyway. But he went ahead, and it's not that loud. I mean, because the muffler is right up under here. The tailpipe is about 25 feet away. 4-inch tailpipe. You don't even notice it any louder than what it was hardly with the muffler on. You do notice it on the exhaust whenever you're like pulling or taking a lot of pressure, downshifting. It pops, bangs, and farts like a high school kid going to a Taco Bell on a midnight run. It just pops and bangs and burps, but it goes. So I don't know. So it's just, but what we've done, let me hold on a second. I'll readjust the camera. We readjusted the camera and got out of the sunshine, so a little bit not as bright. So here's a scenario. Right up here on top of the hill, my pointer is the overlook. That's about 9,300 feet elevation. We're about 9,000, a little over 9,100. So the drive coming down here is about 9,200 feet elevation. I've driven it a couple times to Panguitch, which is about 40 miles to the northeast, and up the mountain. So Cedar City is to the west, about 29 miles, and Cedar City sits at about 5,800 feet elevation. Panguitch, 40 miles that way, sits about 6,500 feet elevation. So either way I go, I'm going to have about close to a 3,000 foot elevation change, which means uphill, both ways. The peaks over here. So we're in the middle of all these peaks. You've seen in the previous video, when I came out of Cedar City, I had to stop every, half mile or mile and pull over and let the bus cool down. Well, I took it to Panguitch, and a couple weeks ago, back in the middle of June, this is after the 4th of July, so this is like, I don't know, the 9th or 10th, something like that, but it's after the 4th. But I went to Panguitch to get groceries and came back, and I come up this mountain, which is a couple of good, there's a 6% and an 8% grade coming up, which is pretty standard for this area. And coming out of Panguitch towards the 14 highway connection, which is about, I don't know, 20 miles, give or take, it got to about 200, 205 on the gauge, which is normal. So it was good. We started up the hill on Highway 14, which is the first thing is uphill. And lo and behold, this is the first time ever that I have driven the bus, that the bus came all the way up the first hill without setting off the alarm. It never got to the 218-degree alarm setting where it would beep, beep, beep. As everyone's heard in my videos, it went to the first one, and it never did that before. I had to slow down coming up some of the hills. Went to the next hill, pulled off a little bit just because it was running about 215, so I wanted to let it sit for a little bit. So it dropped down to about 205. Took off again, the next 8% grade, all the way to the top. No alarms. It just pulled and pulled, and it does have an issue. I'll go with that in just a minute or two. Just pulled. And the third hill, which is this one over here, another 6% grade. And I started up it. Once again, all the way up the hill. No alarms. This is the first time ever that I have gone up a mountain hill without the alarms going off from the bottom to the top and having to stop every, few miles. So I did this twice. Today I went to Panguitch again. And granted, it's about 95 degrees, so it's a little hotter than it was back in the middle of June. So the ambient temperature is going to be hotter, and it is. Today didn't fare as well. Did the same thing as I was coming out of Panguitch towards 14. It got hot up to 240, just on a slight grade. So I pulled over and let it cool off. And then we came up the hill a little bit and let it cool off again at a pull off. And so then I started up the first big hill. The thing just shot right up the hill. Not a problem. Got to about 215 on the temperature gauge. Came right up, never alarmed. Got to the top, started back down. Started up through the second hill. And the second 8% grade. So I pulled off. There's a big pull off. I pulled off and waited because it was running about 215 again. So it's just on that cusp of getting to the alarm system. So pulled off and let it drop down to about 205, 208, and took off again. Well, it crawled and crawled, and here's where the next issue is that I'm having a problem with. But anyway, we'll go on past that and got to the top and took off again and just shot down. The third hill, I had to pull over and wait for 15 minutes because it was alarming again at 225, way up there. So I let it sit down to about 195, took off again, made it up the hill. And then the last hill, which is this one here, getting into our driveway, it made it. Alarm was going off as on the way up, but it pulled, 25 miles an hour, and that was max. It was not going any faster than that. And granted, these aren't really big hills. I mean, yeah, and this is a big heavy bus. So, like we said, it's not going to pull very fast, But uh, we'll bring you in here again, and I want the mechanics out there. I want to explain the overheating issue, or the overheating, what's going on or what's not going on. I'm confused, and nobody can seem to really know right now what to do with it. So we're going to bring you back over here, and I'm going to show you we're going to go through some stats, some temperatures, and some everything else, and we'll go from there. So let's move on into the engine area. All right, here we go. We're going to explain a few things. Coolant reservoir, plastic, plastic cap, 10 pounds of pressure, not connected to the radiator. Radiator is back behind here, the shroud. Radiator starts right about this level, right here, and goes all the way down to the bottom of the bumper. This part above here is the cooler for the turbo. So this hose is a turbo hose, it's not a radiator hose. The radiator hose comes off the water pump right here. This is my coolant temperature sensor. Thermostat is right here under that block. And this is the water fill that comes right in below the coolant sensor into the water pump. And this is a glycol filter that goes through and goes back into the water pump. This hose and another hose go off to the driver's heater, and also the rear heater that what I had in here. So this is an add-on to put in there. All right, so mechanically replace the fan clutch. Mechanical fan clutch, not a fan clutch, not a one. And I had somebody ask me, why don't you just put an electric fan on there with a switch? Well, I did that. Didn't help at all. The reason is, and we'll kind of show you here in the front, the reason is it didn't really hit the radiator. So we'll look into that in a second. But here's the issue. This thing, like I said, will run 195 degrees, flat stretches all day long, maybe 200, 205 if you've got a little bit of an incline or running with the air conditioners on. You put a 50-foot or 100-foot elevation change in it, it gains 15, 20 degrees. Symptoms are the gauge inside says will be alarming at 220, like I said, 218 it will set off one alarm. It sets off an additional alarm at about 230. It sets off a third alarm at 240. All right, here's the scenario. At 240 degrees on the gauge, alarm's going off. I pull over, pop open at the hood, radiator, water's right about here. And it's just kind of maybe just a little bit churning, okay? I checked the temperature in the radiator with my infrared thermometer. In here, the top of the radiator, it'll be 105 degrees. Bottom of the radiator is where the fluid goes in, because this feeds in from the bottom on one side and it comes out the bottom on the other. 170, 175. So like a 70 degrees difference from the bottom of the radiator to the top of the radiator. Gauge is showing 240 degrees. Water temperature in here is 195, right off of the coolant temperature sensor, which is right here. Right there. I mean, you were like, what, let's see, 5 inches away, and it's 195 in here, but this is showing 240. Something not adding up. It has never overheated, never has lost any fluid, never has blown anything out. So I've had it in 3 years, added maybe a gallon of antifreeze to it in there. And so that's the confusing part. So what is it doing? I don't know. And whenever it gets hot, I can pull over, let the engine run and idle for 3 to 5 minutes. It'll drop 40 to 50 degrees at idle. And then when I take off, of course, putting more pressure on it, going uphill again, it raises pretty quick. So that's the reason why I have to pull off so many times, because pull off, cool down 40, 50 degrees, Another mile, it goes up 40, 50 degrees. Pull off, drop down 30, 40, 50 degrees. Another mile, up 30, 40, 50 degrees. So you can see why that it's like, what's going on? Never has overheated, never has lost coolant, nothing wrong with the heads. The turbo works great, seems to be working fine. It whines and it goes, and now it's got more pressure since the exhaust is missing. So I don't know. Let me explain the front part of the radiator system. Underneath this big grill here is the radiator, and also this part from right here all the way down to behind the front bumper here is the AC evaporator, which is in front of the radiator and also in front of this piece right here. It's probably about 10 inches. It goes all the way across, which is your turbo cooler, air cooler. So the radiator on this bus only starts right about there. It's from there down to the bottom of the bumper. That's the radiator. So this problem when I had when I put the electric fan on, it was like an 18-inch electric fan, radiator fan. It only can mount, because this grill was in the way, it only can mount in here. So what I was doing was half of the radiator fan was cooling off the upper part of the evaporator and pushing air through the intercooler, and the bottom part was only hitting about the top 1/4 of the radiator. So basically everything from here down was not getting the extra fan pushed through, and it just didn't help at all. Didn't change anything when I would turn it on when it was get hot. Because as I said before, what goes on is when the temperature gauge is a 230, 240 inside, and I check the radiator right back in here behind the evaporator at the top of the radiator, and it'll be 100, like I said, 105 to 110. And then I check it down here behind the radiator, the evaporator, I'm sorry, at the very bottom. And it'd be 170 to 185, 190. Never has the radiator gotten to anywhere 200 degrees. When the gauge is showing 240, 180, 110, 70 degrees difference. So what does that mean? Does that mean my radiator is plugged up? The inlet and outlet come in down here, about right here. They both come in at the bottom. Unlike a typical radiator for like a pickup where you have a high and a low, this one has low and low. So the water is basically getting circulated right through here in this area. So that, from what I understand from other bus people and truck people, that a lot of times this upper part of the radiator will get plugged up because there's not enough water circulation, and therefore you're not getting as much cooling capacity. But I had the whole system flushed at the international dealership, chemical flushed, and didn't help any, didn't change it a bit. So I don't know, is it radiator cap? Is it a radiator? Is it the fan? I mean, if this is not getting hot, does that mean that the fan clutch is not kicking in? You can hear it kick in when it's cool, but when the radiator gets hot, I really don't ever hear it kick in again. So maybe this is the issue for the overheating. Don't know. So we'll continue to think about that. But that's the fun of it. There's the dog. He's watching some people. Covered pretty much everything. Like I said, I've only added about a gallon or so of coolant in the reservoir, and part of that was due when I took my rear heater out. I lost a lot of coolant, so that was part of that. But I mean, for 3 years, 8,000, almost 10,000 miles, maybe half a gallon of coolant, it's not too bad, I don't think. So it really, like I said, doesn't mean that the heads are leaking any coolant. But after it went to the shop, and these repairs cost me about $2,000. The fan clutch, the muffler replacement, the diagnostic, etc., was a little over $2,000 on this. Well, here's the symptoms now after it was repaired. Cold start, still won't cold start very well. Still smokes when it cold starts. It rattles. and it sounds like it's hitting on about 3 cylinders until it warms up a bit. Still has no power. I cannot hardly move anywhere when I'm taking off. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, I was at another campsite and I pulled up to talk to my boss, and up against a speed bump. And I got through talking. I went to go over the speed bump. I had to push it to the floor, and it barely crawled over the speed bump. It had no power to even get itself hardly over that speed bump. And when you pull out on the road, same way. It just dogs down. It will not hardly move until it gets enough RPM to build up, and then it takes off. The thing on the flat ground runs like a scalded dog. It just goes and goes and goes. I mean, it's interesting. These are all like intermittent problems. Now, the starting is not intermittent. The no power is not intermittent. The cooling, heating issue, that's been going on for years. So maybe we'll get that figured out. Here's the fourth thing that's happened since this all took place is, um, and only on occasion, intermittently again, it's not every time, going up a hill, going up a grade. You've got a continual pressure on it. You're going through and you're pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing. And what happens? What happened? This has happened 3 times since I got it back from the shop. Going up a hill, you're just pushing along. All of a sudden, you have no power. The engine's still running, but it's like it goes into limp mode, and it dogs down, and you cannot make it go any faster. You throw it in manually into a lower gear. Doesn't change anything. You have to pull over the side of the road, put it in neutral, pump the fuel a couple times, get it going, throw it back in gear, and take off. And it may not do that again for 3 or 4 more hills or another week or something. So, but it's happened 3 times. Yesterday, coming up from Panguitch, coming up the hill over here, the issue I was talking about was pulling the hill at a slow speed, 25, 30 miles an hour, and all of a sudden it just gave out and it wouldn't go any further. I had to just roll over to the shoulder and would let the cars go by me because I had no power to even pull anything. Even when I threw it in first gear, low gear, it still would not move until it pumped the fuel a couple times, blew out some smoke, and then it'll take off. So with that in mind, I'm not for sure what that means. I'm leaning towards injectors still. Leaning towards injectors. But it runs so good to be acting so bad because it idles great. It goes down the highway, flat speeds, 70 miles an hour. These hills through here, 65, 70, not a problem. You put it, like I said, put an elevation change into it, and it turns into a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It just flip flops and just turns to crap. But all intermittently. So who knows? Um, do I take it back to the mechanic in Cedar City? I don't know. Do I drive it to the next town or just drive it till it quits and then take it in again? I don't know. We'll see. But here we are. We'll go ahead and finish this video. There's the dog. This is if we can focus in on that. Amen Diesel, full service diesel repair. This is in Cedar City. His name is Steve, owns the diesel repair. He does everything from tires to complete engine rebuilds. And it looks like on his card, he works on most everything except doesn't work on Mercedes. So engines, but he does International, Cummins, Power Strokes, and other things. So yeah, I would recommend him. He did what I asked, to check it in, and it is running better intermittently than it did when it went down the hill. Um, so it's working. They're working in the right direction. But as for fixing it completely, no, didn't do it. And as for the smoking and the white and the gray smoke, like I showed you before in previous videos, intermittent again. I've had to do it 3 or 4 times. And one time was take my pointer right up there. That's the overlook. We stopped in there on the way back from Cedar City to take videos of the lake, which you've seen. And I took off and then smoked like a freight train for a quarter mile. It just covered everything. It looked like there was a controlled burn in the national forest behind me. There was so much smoke on the road. It stayed and lingered. And it did it once again in Panguitch when I went to take off. It just smoked for a good quarter mile and had no power until it burned up some RPMs, and then it took off. Didn't do it again. And it did it yesterday once more on the way to Panguitch, just for a short spell. So, and once again, intermittent. Maybe we'll figure out what's going on with this thing. It's a great bus. I love my bus, but I'm starting to lose faith in and driving it sometimes, because especially going up hills, when you lose your power and you can't go anywhere. You can't pull off because the shoulder's only a foot wide. So you've got to sit there on the road and hopefully that you pray that you can get it back in gear and it takes off again. So who knows? Life's an adventure. Bus life's an adventure. Nomad life's an adventure. Dog's life's an adventure. But heck, look where I'm at. So we'll end the video here for everyone. So let me know in your comments what you think some of these issues might be. And we'll just putter on and see what happens. We're here for another couple months. And who knows? Maybe when we head out, it'll be fine. Or maybe we'll do whatever we need. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one, and we'll see you guys on around the campsite. Enjoy the view while we close out the video.